Hello, welcome in. This is Beyond the Box Score. I'm your host, Jacob Gibbs, and I'm joined by two guests today to bring you Week 10 mastering matchups. Going to help you with some tough start-sit decisions. What do we do with Roma Dunze coming off the goose egg? Can we expect another big game from Colston Loveland? Is the answer to simply start all your Bears versus the Giants? We're going to spend some time sorting through all that, sorting through the quarterback position. I know a lot of you guys are probably reeling with Jane Daniels out, Patrick Mahomes, Dak Prescott, Joe Flacco all on bye. We've got a lot to get to today. It's week 10. The fantasy playoffs are, just a month away. And so I brought on today two of the biggest nerds that I know. I thought maybe me and Ryan wasn't quite enough. So I also have Max Toscano with us today to help sort through all of this and just talk about some of the developing trends around the league, some interesting stuff here that I think the sickos here are going to enjoy. So, Ryan, I'm going to start with you. How are you doing? How are you feeling as we head into week 10?
Doing great, man. Yeah, having an amazing day. Getting ratioed by JJ Zacharyson on Twitter for being too young to play the PS2. So, yeah, just, it's stuff of my dreams.
Max, big PS2 fan?
I'm also too young to play the PS2, and the only video games I've ever really played, because I had a difficult time getting through Black Ops in 5th grade, and all the other kids got through it, and I struggled, and I did not think it was for me. We're pretty much Madden, so I got a PS5 when NCAA 25 came back out, so I went from nothing to that. So I got to tell you, I have no information on this.
I feel like a decent number of our listeners might be able to relate to just the sports games. Can you at least relate to me and Ryan and our Pokemon fandom? Is that something for you?
It's something that a bunch of kids I went to school with were into.
Yeah.
That, I get it. It's pretty cool. I used to collect them when I was in 2nd grade, and my brother and I used to fight over the cards. But the problem is that we were picking them based on which animal was the coolest. So I don't think we were really doing it right.
But I think that's a good way to do it. Yeah. All right. So Max, first time on the program. Thank you for being here. Welcome to Beyond the Box Score. I feel like this is kind of a perfect fit for you. We've got, the sickos here, and I think that you can just take them even further. I think there's some stuff that, we're all coming from more of the fantasy football background, but Max is more of a true ball knower. And I'm very excited to get into some of the X's and O's. I don't want to spoil it, but he does have an actual whiteboard that he's brought to help prepare some things of some visualizations for us. So I'm very excited for this. What can you tell the sickos here, the fans of Beyond the Box Score, about yourself, about what you do, your writing, and all that?
Yeah, well, I think I take a unique approach to X's and O's in that I never played the game beyond a 7th grade level, and back then we were just running to the left and running to the right, so there wasn't really a whole lot to think about. But I've always been fascinated with it, so I really learned it from nothing, and I think that kind of makes me a little bit more able to translate it to the average person. Which is great for practical applications like fantasy, right? Because that's everybody's true skin in the game, I think, when it comes to actually participating in the football world. I write about a lot of X's and O's things in general, but I think my biggest brand, so to speak, is with the tight ends. I have a Substack called Remember the Tight Ends, which is all about the position and kind of breaking down the difficult X's and O's, minutia that is required to understanding tight end deployment and tight end importance, because it's kind of the only position that's role is not entirely clearly delineated. And I think that it's so sensitive to these complicated factors that makes it a little bit lost in translation for the average football fan. So I think it's just it's a cool way to examine trends, and it's also a cool way to communicate those trends to fans.
Definitely, for sure. I think we're, again, still a little bit slow in catching up to understanding all of this as a fantasy community. A lot of people had super high expectations for Dalton Kincaid, Kyle Pitts, and it's why can't they get on the field? 50% route rate for Dalton Kincaid. What are we doing? Why did we draft him so high if we're not even going to use him? It's well, they are using him for a very important role. It's just not one that's going to be on the field all the time because of their identity and the way that they like to run the ball, and they've got different players to fill those roles. That's not his role. There are some tight ends that fill that role. And so I want to start by asking you about one of them, I think, potentially, and that's Colston Loveland. Beyond the Box Score people very invested in the outcome for Colston Loveland. We finally saw the big breakout. literally won an NFL game all on his own, pretty much. So what can you tell us about Loveland? How are you feeling about his outlook, how he's adapted to the NFL so far? Do you think he's somebody who can be on the field all of the time? One of those rare tight ends who can add receiving, but can also be out there to play all three downs. And if you have any takes on Loveland versus Tyler Warren in terms of like a long-term outlet for fantasy purposes, I would love to hear those too.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's hard to say as far as long-term fantasy outlook goes for any tight end because it's so sensitive to the situation around them. It's kind of the, when you look at almost an aquatic environment, a lot of scientists will pick a specific species to test the pollution levels with. So like, what's the population level of this salamander? And if it's going down, we can tell that the water's a little bit polluted. Like, they're kind of the indicator species of offensive production in a lot of ways. And I think that they are so sensitive to this stuff. So it's so hard to predict unless you have like a Travis Kelce. And even Travis Kelce, right? Like, if you were to switch Travis Kelce and Dallas Goedert in the womb, they may beat each other in a lot of ways. It's so hard to predict long term. But as far as Loveland goes, I was a big fan of him as a prospect. I see no reason to move off of any optimism even before this week. Like, this is such a developmental position, especially since like we're talking about, getting on the field is so about what you do as a blocker as well, and that really opens things up for you as a receiver and as a snap share earner. But with Loveland, I think the fact that he's 6'6", 250 and has legitimate length and is in an environment that is committed to the run and is committed to developing tight end blocking, I think there's no reason that he can't become a guy who is a legitimate 3-down starter, even if he just gets to a level like Sam Laporta or TJ Hawkinson, where he's passable in line in a way that doesn't limit you. That's really all you need when a guy can catch the ball and run routes like this. And we're really starting to see the pure route running ability and the ability to tempo, the ability to accelerate and decelerate, the ability to set things up and be smart as a route runner. We're starting to really see that translate with especially with how he did great work on DJ Turner at corner, who's like the only good player on the Bengals defense. So, I'm pretty encouraged by it. The blocking is still seriously a work in progress. They obviously don't trust him as a every down inline guy, but I think he's starting to see more and more exposure, and I think eventually they'll get to that point. And so, when we get there, the receiving, I think, really takes off.
Let's go. Love to hear it. All right. Give us a like if you have not yet. Give us a like. Thank you to everybody for being here today. All the good stuff in the chat. I'm keeping an eye on that as we move along. So if you got any questions for Max, we didn't bring him here just to confirm our priors on Loveland, although that does feel good. Ryan, what do you think? If you switched Kelce and Goddard in the womb, would anybody notice? I feel like I remember at the very beginning of this season, I saw that Max was extremely high on Goddard, and I was like, that makes so much sense. I think you like ranked all the tight ends for real life, and you had him top 3 at least, I think, among current tight ends. And then the other thing I remember was you were extremely high on Tucker Kraft. I was like, this guy knows ball.
Yeah, no, the Tucker Kraft, always a sign of a ball knower. Just completely brutal injury. I'm so mad about that one.
Dude, yeah.
But yeah, no, I kind of see it with Dallas Goedert. Like,
he's so good. People just forget really all about him.
Yeah, we'll never. Obviously, it's an experiment. We'll never be able to run. It's a counterfactual we'll never really have for the rest of his career. But yeah, I love that take.
Yeah, it's fun to talk about at least. Okay, so we have 3 big topics before we get into the start-sit matchups. We're going to get to all the stuff that you usually find on this Thursday program, of course. So we're going to go through position by position, help you get through some of these start-sits. We'll get to some of the advanced matchup notes at the end as well for anybody who is playing DFS, doing sports betting, any of that stuff. But there are some interesting things going on around the league that I wanted to talk to Max about. That's why he's here today, is to help us, help me and Ryan understand and articulate this to the audience here. Max, this is I bring this up a lot, and I just think it's funny. I hope it doesn't bother old Scott Barrett, but he said we should call the show Masters in Matchups, and I said Mastering in Matchups is where we're at. We're trying to figure this out. We are definitely not masters. So this is definitely relevant to matchups, and I think it's something that's really being talked about more and more in the fantasy space these days, really kind of for the first time, at least among mainstream fantasy analysis. And so this is how opposing defenses are matching different types of offenses. And I just wanted to show this tweet if you guys want to go look at it, because you could spend an hour looking at all these different teams. So I don't expect you to be able to look at the visualization and find anything here in terms of takeaways, but this is just very interesting to me. And I wanted to throw it to you, Max, to see if anything stood out. We're definitely going to talk about Seattle today. So if you want to just start there, that's of course very interesting to me with Clint Kubiak.
Yeah, well, I mean, the interesting thing to me is that the big takeaway is you'll get base, and some of it is it's going to be a little bit noisy just because we're in weeks 1 through 8, and maybe a team is missing a receiver for a few weeks, and that changed how they're going to do things, or their quarterback was out, or it can be a little bit noisy, but at the same time, I think it is a good enough sample to tell a lot of things. And even though it isn't adjusted for neutral situations, which I think is big, like if a team's ending up in passing downs a lot more, and maybe they play 12 in those situations like the Browns, that'll change some things. But, at the same time, I think it is generally pretty instructive and reflective of what you would expect. The big takeaway, though, is that you'll get base if you have a reputation of a commitment to the run, and that is your fastball, right? Like if that feels like your fastball, and it really is such a vibes and suggestion thing, because if you look at the Bills, they are an elite run team. They have one of the best run games in the league. They had one of the best run games in the league last year, and they have been just such a wagon on the ground for 2 years now. And so they should have that reputation, right? But at the same time, who's the player on the Bills that scares you the most? It's obviously Josh Allen. And it's obviously what they do as a passing game. And the fact that a lot of the times Dalton Kincaid is going to be the second tight end on the field. He's like 235. Honestly, he came in at the combine at like 240, and he does not look like that. He's not much bigger than, a Drake London. He's not much bigger than a lot of your power slots, and he doesn't really block much more. So you aren't going to get big bodies on the field against a Josh Allen pass game so that you can deal with the physicality of Dalton Kincaid at the point of attack. Like, you don't need that. But if you look at the Seahawks, who are shredding teams through the air because they're getting this, especially with what they're able to do with verticality and what they're able to do with JSN against loaded boxes, not just base personnel, but heavy boxes as well. It's because with Clint Kubiak, with the fact that both of their tight ends are 245 plus, even if Arroyo's not blocking in line, like he is big and long, and they'll attach to the formation credibly. And this is a team that has a reputation of being a run team. And I think the preseason is also kind of scaring people a little bit because we saw them run the football at a clinical level. And some of their wide zone tape is stuff I still use as clinic tape from that preseason, especially that Chiefs game. So it's scary. And I don't think any team really wants to be the first one to blink and say, we can stop their run game right now. They're struggling. But the second we take our foot off the gas, it's gonna, it's gonna hurt us. Like if you're a spread 12 personnel team, like the Bills, like the Chiefs, where that guy is truly more of a wide receiver, in Kelsey's case, because he is, older and isn't gonna really get in there and be as physical as some of these other guys, because it just wouldn't make sense for him. And in the case of Kincaid, because he's just not big and he's not strong, it's different. And so I think that when you get into a situation where you're worried about both of those guys being on the line of scrimmage and this team getting under center and running the football, being a nickel, and this is where I'm going to break out the whiteboard, because the way to explain this, you'll see it when you see the formations, right? So if we're going to let's say we're going to draw a 4-man surface, right? Which is, what that means is you just have 2 tight ends to one side. So I don't know if you guys can see this, right? So you have those 2 tight ends to one side. So we're going to put,
that's the Y and the F for anyone confused. Yeah.
So those are just the 2 tight ends. And so when you have all these gaps, right? So you have these hash marks are gaps. You have all these gaps to deal with. And let's say that you're in base defense, right? Let's say we're going to take a 3-4, because the difference between a 3-4 defense in base and a 4-3 defense is much bigger, because it changes the line of scrimmage a lot more. And so if you are in your base 3-4, you can have 5 guys on the line of scrimmage. Sam Will, and then you have your right. So this is going to be your box in a 3-4. And so if you want to get into nickel, we're actually going to add the safety of the box here. So this is your full box in a base 3-4. Now, if you want to get into nickel against this, you have to take that Sam linebacker off the field. So you can stick your nickel in here, right? That's not good. That guy's 210 pounds. And so both of these tight ends, in the case of Barner's like 260 and Arroyo is 250, and both, are physical, that's not a great situation. And so a lot of times you're going to have to get into a 4-down front, regardless of what you are, right? So if you're a base 3-4 team, you're still getting into 4-down a lot. You're still getting into 4-down a lot against these, again, or when you're in nickel, excuse me. And so at that point, it becomes difficult to fit this surface.
So I guess to maybe simplify for the audience a little bit, is all you need to do basically to just get 2 blocking plus receiving capable tight ends lined up next to each other to get these favorable looks we're talking about, or is there more to this than maybe I'm just immediately seeing?
There's not more to it, but the challenge is in getting those guys, and it's pretty tough. There aren't that many of them. But if you look at it here, right, you see that you have 4 guys on the line of scrimmage in nickel here. There's a lot of space on that line. And so when you have these extra surfaces, you have to be able to modify it. So you want to be able to bump guys over. You want to be able to close all this extra space, because if you don't, there are just big bubbles for them to run into. And so from a defensive coordinator point of view, you're nervous about this.
Mm-hmm.
And especially if you want to keep the safeties out, right? So if you're going to keep the safeties out and you're going to get into this kind of box, right? You're going to have these 7 guys in the box against 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 gaps, and one of them is a 210-pound nickel. That is just a huge disadvantage. There's a huge disadvantage. And so if you look here, there's going to be this big bubble a lot of times right in here in those extra gaps. And so how defenses have to deal with that, you need big bodies and you need guys on the line of scrimmage. And so it's really hard to deal with in nickel. And there are teams that will try to do as much as they can, but especially if you don't have really big edges who can line up, head up on those tight ends and 2-gap those guys and control those perimeter gaps and keep your nickel clean. It's just, the math is not great. The math is not great. And so that is why teams, especially against the Seahawks, are so unwilling to do it, because it just becomes so easy for them in theory to turn and run it. Now, their run game is not that good. I would try it, because it's just not worth it to sustain the damages that teams are sustaining. And I don't know if they can go out there and Lions you or Ravens you and rush for 250 yards. But the fact of the matter is, they will have an answer to that, and they can do all this without substituting. So your nickel better be willing to get in there. And I think it's not a great answer on the whiteboard. It just isn't. And so I think that defensive coordinator are going to be hesitant to do it.
All right. Yeah.
So is it kind of essentially teams have to pick their poison? They either put the extra safety in the box, or their nickel is in there and they get killed on the run.
Right.
To kind of quickly sum that up. Yeah.
Right, like
Yep.
especially in nickel, if you have two extra guys on the line of scrimmage, if they're in three wide, it's obviously a little bit different, but they won't be. The Bills will be when they're in 12 a lot, but they won't be. And if they aren't, you can stick your nickel on the ball. It doesn't matter. Like teams, the Steelers used to do this against Mark Andrews a lot. Whenever he was that extra guy on the line, is they would just walk up Minka as the Sam linebacker, and he would be fine. You can't be forced to choose between single high, which is devastating because then you can't double JSN. They're just going to rip glance routes to him, and you're in the same problem, nickel or base, that you were before. Or you're going to play light boxes, and you're going to be not just down a number, but down size as well.
Really good stuff, Max. Thank you. So this is really interesting. Obviously, like we've seen Seattle on live TV recently, and we've seen them just look like an absolute machine, I think, offensively and defensively. And that's because they have some unique answers to this personnel problem. And really, they're kind of dictating what opposing defenses have to do, as Max just laid out. If that felt like it went over your head a little bit, like that's why we've got the graph up today. And then I think, seriously, go back and spend some time with this. You might have to throw it on the TV to get a look at Max's X's and O's there. But I do think it's worth it. I think this is very interesting. I think this is like a deeper layer to understanding what's happening with a lot of these matchups that we're talking about. And it definitely does affect fantasy. I mean, for anybody who has JSN or who has played against JSN this year, you understand that it has had a profound impact on fantasy. So we're going to get back and talk more about that, but we do need to hit our first break. We'll be right back.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ, streaming free anywhere you are.
All right, so yeah, you can see here the red, like on Seattle here at the bottom right of the chart, shows that teams are choosing to use base defense a lot against the Seahawks as a way to try to respond to what the Seahawks are showing them with their offensive personnel, as Max just laid out. But somebody like the Kansas City Chiefs are not getting that. They've got much more blue. They're just really not a team that defenses have to worry about the run for. And so they don't pose that threat. Even though the Seahawks haven't been running well, they do pose that threat because of their reputation, because of the way that they're using this personnel. Max, I'm curious just real quick if you think there's a chance that defenses are going to adjust. We're going to see them adjust to what Darnold and Jackson Smith and Jigba and Clint Kubiak have been doing in the passing game, and that then we will see much better running from the Seahawks as a response to that. Please tell us yes, because Ryan and I really need for our Kenneth Walker bags. Please.
Yeah, well, I mean, it feels like they're going to have to.
Yes.
Because this can't be sustainable. I'm very curious to see what the Rams do, just because they are the sort of not just Fangio himself, but the new age Fangio-ish guys. Even if they've worked for him or his disciples, like Shula has, or haven't. In the case of Mike Macdonald, like Mike Macdonald comes from Wink Martindale and Rex Ryan, but he's kind of Fangio-ized that. And so you see these really modern defensive guys. It's actually kind of a shame that we don't get to see them play their own defense, because I'd be incredibly curious to see how they react to it with Nicky Manwari and with Mike Macdonald, who has really pioneered the nickel to everything positionless slot on the other side, right? With Kyle Hamilton, who's a guy who's 220 and long, is able to play in the box and is able to play physical. But you look at the Eagles with Cooper DeJean, who is really also kind of a hybrid outside linebacker type. You look at the Texans with Jalen Petrie, even though the Texans, what they do up front is going to have to change as far as like, and this is not part of the discussion, this is a whole different thing, but like what they do with Petrie as that kind of hybrid the new box safety is the nickel at the end of the day. And so if you can get your nickel to be that kind of guy and be that kind of ass kicker, you can give yourself sort of a chance. But I think that if they're putting 250-pound guys on there, it's going to be hard. But I think you have to. They're shredding teams. Like Sam Darnold is a good quarterback, and he's playing the best football of his career, way better than last year, I might add. But you can't let him do this, right? You can't make him look like prime Brady statistically. You just can't do it. And And I think that teams are going to have to make a concerted effort to take away JSN. I think that he's going to have to be doubled, and that's going to require two safeties not being in the box because you got to have one guy deep. You got to double him. You got to figure something out. So I'm circling that Rams matchup to see what happens. And I think that if they can pull it off, then the rest of the league will need to follow. But honestly, they're not playing a lot of teams that have the kind of guys that they need. But it's going to happen at some point, right?
Yeah, better days ahead for Kenneth Walker, guaranteed, coming. All right, so here, I think to his point, like this is a really interesting tweet here from Zane, who has been doing some really cool stuff using the Fantasy Points data suite here. And he's talked about how the Seahawks have just kind of been ahead of the league. And I think that to the point he was just making, like there are some specific players who allow you to better adapt to this problem, right? And so this chart specifically shows, you'll see like the extreme green, the dark green are the Seattle Seahawks and then the Baltimore Ravens, where they've been able to stay in nickel more often against these bigger personnel sets on first and second downs because they have, one, like those are both Mike McDonald influenced teams, of course, in the play calling, but also they do have studs in Nick Eminem and Kyle Hamilton who are able to help cover a lot of different bases there. So I think that's really interesting. Wanted to point this tweet out too. This is just another piece of the puzzle here that you can dig into if you want. And then on the offensive side of the ball, just to wrap up with the Seahawks, 98 dropbacks with these bigger personnel sets. 90 of those 98 dropbacks have come on first and second down. And I just think that also speaks to what we're talking about here, where they're showing the run on these early downs with these bigger sets. It looks like it's going to be a run, but then they're dropping back on those plays, and that's catching defenses off guard. And so that's, of course, we've detailed the ridiculous Jackson Smith and Jigba yard per route run rates, all of the ridiculous accuracy notes for Darnold. Not to take anything away from those guys, they're playing phenomenally. But this is just a big part of what's happening. I just wanted to illustrate this for people as we go beyond the box score here to try to understand. It's probably going to have to regress. It would be the most ridiculous yard per route run rate that we've ever seen. But it's not randomness. Like it's working because they're staying ahead of defenses. And it's going to be really interesting to see how it develops down the stretch. I have one more topic. You guys ready to move on to the 6 offensive lineman topic? Because I think this is very fun.
Let's do it.
Okay, so teams are using, you've probably noticed, maybe you're watching the Steelers and they throw to an offensive lineman and it's just like, what's going on? I feel like I've been noticing more and more these big sets getting trotted out there, especially like the Texans have had to do it more and more lately. And so that's what I've got pulled up here now is the number of plays where a team has 6 offensive linemen on the field. The Texans are first in the league with 12.4 plays per game with 6 offensive linemen on the field. Let me zoom in a little bit, make this better for you visually. And so I've got some notes on that. I want to get your guys' thoughts on it. I don't know how fantasy relevant it is. I promise we're going to get to some fantasy takes. I know you guys are here for that. But, man, I just wanted to talk through some of this stuff because it's like 6 offensive linemen on the field. That's awesome. I love that. So teams are doing it way more, especially lately. It's up 64% over the past month. Over the past month, the Cardinals, the Jaguars, the Texans, and the Browns all have double-digit offensive plays per game with 6 offensive linemen on the field. Before that, it was only the Commanders who hit that double-digit average. And the Commanders haven't been doing it as much lately, which I think is interesting. It could just be a small sample size thing, but these plays have been much less effective lately over the past month, not nearly as effective as the month before that. So maybe defenses are adjusting. I don't really know. I would love to get any takes from y'all on that. Overall, success rate, more effective on these plays, 47.3 offensive success rate with 6 offensive linemen on the field compared to 46.1% on all their plays. Rushing EPA is way up on these plays. Passing EPA is down slightly. 76% run rate. So teams are choosing to run at a high rate. Not a big surprise, but 76% run rate is extremely high with 6 offensive linemen on the field. And then I wanted to highlight 3 teams in particular. So stacked box rate is, of course, way up against these sets. You got 6 offensive linemen, so teams stack the box 75% of the time league-wide. There are 3 teams that somehow don't have a high stack box rate, and I would love to hear any thoughts on this. Maybe it's just a testament to like how pathetic and how disrespected like the passing games are for these teams. It's the Dolphins, the Texans, and the Steelers. 54% for the Dolphins, 47% for the Texans, 42% for the Steelers. Maybe they just don't think that the Texans can run on them even with an extra offensive lineman on the field. The Steelers in particular are interesting to me. The run rate is way lower than the rest of the league when using 6 offensive linemen, and their play action rate is lower too. So they're actually like going straight drop back on a weird number of these plays. Arthur Smith loves that. Any takeaways that you have on this, Max?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the initial takeaway that people will have is that this is a blocking tight end stat, right? That there's a shortage of blocking tight ends, and I think that that's part of it. But I think it's a little bit more nuanced than that. I think it's a two-way tight end stat. There's I think the challenge for a tight end coming into the league, especially nowadays, is that if you lean too much on your ability as a receiver, you're going to run into redundancy with the wide receivers. And, a lot of times most of the time you're going to be way worse than them, unless you're like a Kelsey or a Bowers, who is truly so rare as a route runner and separator in space that they can play that role on a full-time level. But on the other extreme, and I think that's the more common one, right? Like, I think that's the more common issue these guys run into. But on the other end, especially as a response to having so many of those types of tight ends enter the league, is that the league has really placed a premium on the pure blocker types, right? Like your John Bates, your Brock Wright, your Darnell Washington, like all of these guys who are pure blockers only and don't really do anything in the passing game. And I think that what we're kind of finding, and what the league is wising up to, the same way as they did 2 years ago, with realizing that 12 personnel isn't going to give you anything unless it's 12 personnel and not fake 11, is that what's the point of a tight end who doesn't catch a little bit, right? Like, the whole idea of the tight end is that you are a member of the offensive line who can detach and catch. And if you can't do any of the receiving element of that, you might as well just have a 6 offensive lineman out there. And if you can't do any of the blocking element of that, at least relative to a blocking slot receiver, you might as well have a 3rd receiver out there. And so I think that teams are realizing that, like, there's just no point in having either extremes of these guys out there. And I think it makes total sense. But, if a guy can do the Jackson Hawes thing where every once in a while he detaches and catches a check down and goes for 9 yards, in theory he's giving a little bit more, but teams are willing to give that up in a lot. And that's a bad example because they don't really do it that much anymore since they got Hawes to do that role as a guy who can do a little bit more athletically. But it just speaks to the fact that if you're a tight end, you need to block in line, and you need to be able to go out there and run routes. And the NFL, more than any other position right now, is starving for a George Kittle. Obviously, of course, because he's so amazing, but is starving for a George Kittle, is starving for an AJ Barner, even is starving for somebody who, even a Dawson Knox, right? Like somebody who can block in line and do somewhat serious things in the passing game, even at a minimum. And I think that this really just speaks to the fact that the NFL doesn't need any fake tight ends anymore, whether it's just pure blockers or pure receivers who can't play wide receiver full time, because you need that inline presence, right? You need that Y to run the football. You just do. The math does not work otherwise consistently. And they're going to get it. They're going to get it, whether it's an extra offensive lineman or it's a real tight end. And if that guy can also go run routes and catch, that is a huge advantage to you and a huge serve breaker. But they can always put 3 wide receivers out there. And if that guy's not going to catch the ball, it might as well be an offensive lineman. Now for the Texans, and this is kind of the last thing I'll say before I wrap this up and turn it back to you guys, the Texans are doing it as a pure panic measure, like a
yeah, that's what it's felt like, yeah.
pass protection. And at that point, you're not breaking serve. You're screwed. Like you're playing, it's like rolling a hockey team permanently on the penalty kill at that point. You're screwed. The numbers are so bad for you. And it just goes to show you the kind of conditions that CJ Stroud is operating under. And of course, what it's doing to Nico Collins' production too. And this is so bad for Nico Collins, I think, because all of a sudden you literally don't have an eligible to cover, and you free up a defender to double him without consequences. So, and it's not that there'd be consequences anyway, because who else they have? Jalen Knowles flashed a little bit. That's it. But like, yeah, it's, there are so few tight ends that can 1v1 a DN in pass protection. I mean, and that's not part of your job. That is not part of your job. Run blocking it is, but not in pass protection. So, like, if you need that guy, they are screwed.
All right, this has been a lot of fun. Shout out Darnell Washington. Shout out Jackson Hawes. All the big boys. I want to, before we leave this topic, Ryan, do you have anything first on this?
I don't know. Yeah, my only addition was going to be laughing at the Texans, but I think we did that.
So before we leave this topic, we've got, obviously Dalton Kincaid. I wanted to ask you guys if there's anybody else. So, of course, this is Max's wheelhouse. But anybody else for people to be thinking about before we get into the Week 10 specific stuff in terms of tight ends who might be affected by this, might not be able, so basically you have to be Brock Bowers, right? You have to be near that level of player. You have to be better than the players who are going to be in the slot at wide receiver to get on the field. If teams are willing to move more and more in this direction, we might be seeing some of these tweener tight ends die out a little bit. So that's obviously Kincaid. The other guys that come to mind for me are potentially Rondé Gadsden. Somebody people are very excited for, potentially Harold Fannin Jr. Any names you want to throw out for people to think about who might be affected negatively by this?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting about a lot of those guys because it's their production is really going to depend on how unhealthy the offense is overall, right? Like how a guy like Gadsden is going to be able to produce if they're in obvious pass situations a lot, because that's when you can bring the guy in and put him at true tight end and eliminate all these personnel conflicts, because then they can just run routes as like a tight end without the run pass trade-off, because you've already made it by being in 3rd and 9. So at that point, the issue is ameliorated. And so they're sort of like the designated pass rushers of tight ends. And if a team really has a terrible run game and they have a terrible defense and they're going to be dropping back 50 times a game, like the Chargers are, by the way, Rondé Gadsden's going to get a lot of touches. But as far as a long-term dynasty play kind of thing, these guys should be faded. But if you look at the right situations, like Harold Fannin, for instance, they don't have any receivers. He's going to be out there catching 6-7 checkdowns a game. And if you're in a PPR league, like he's gonna put up numbers for you. But like you turn on the tape, it's just empty calorie stuff, and it's not something I would build my offense around. But if you're in a shorter term situation, if you're in a redraft league, Gadsden's going to be good. Kincaid's going to be good because Shakir hasn't been right, and he's been their best 3rd down player. And the Bills throw enough that he's going to get balls. But long term, though, yeah, I mean, these guys are going to die out, and they're dying out really quickly. And I think that's good because Kittle is so much cooler. I'm sorry, he just is. He's so much cooler than Darren Waller. Like, and Tucker Kraft and Jason Witten and Gronk. And I would like to go back.
Ameliorated. What a beautiful word. Thank you for being here, Max. This has been a lot of fun. So yeah, I'm going to, we talked about those guys. I'm going to throw a few more youngsters at you. Mason Taylor, we think can cut it, right? Can be an every down guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And like the AJ Barners of the world, we feel good about that. Do you have takes on Arroyo?
Yeah. I mean, like he's 6'4", 250. And he's in an area that's going to at least try to teach him how to run the ball. Barner's going to be a tough nut to crack. It's hard for me to imagine him ever putting up big, consistent numbers there.
In my mind, it's almost like Luke Musgrave with Tucker Kraft, where it's like I kind of like him in theory, but Tucker Kraft's a dog, Like I doubt he's going to get on the field if they're still on the same team.
Yeah, especially outside of a sub-package role. And, I don't even know if they're going to take A.J. Barner off the field all the time on 3rd downs because, like, he can protect. So what if you get in a situation where you might want to leave that guy in, you feel a little bit better about Barner, and he can run routes enough that, you're not making a huge enough trade-off. So Arroyo went to a good situation for real-life rotational use. As far as a huge fantasy asset, he's going to have to really crush it.
All right, the last one, I need you to make me feel good about Terrence Ferguson. He's one of my favorite freaking prospects from this class. Do you think he can do it? It seems like Sean McVay has some concerns.
I think he's in week 8 of his rookie year. I mean, Tucker Kraft at this point in his rookie year literally did nothing. Yeah. He barely played. And that's a guy who's was a more developed and stronger blocker out of college than Ferguson, and it was rough. It was rough early, and it always is. AJ Barner's an exception because he really did come out as a pure blocker, and he was older and he's long. He's so developed by Harbaugh and Sharon Moore at Michigan. This is the norm. This is the norm for these guys. And now Ferguson's starting to get more snaps. He's starting to become their third down guy, which I noticed last week. And you know what? We're seeing the athletic juice and the explosiveness the route translate. And it's starting to trickle in. And it's going to be a while before he is the every down guy. But he's 6'5", 250. He's got above average length. And he's with a guy in Sean McVay who knows what needs to be done. He's not going to try to do what the Panthers did with JT Sanders and ruin him by taking weight off and saying, we're going to make him some nebulous offensive weapon. Like, they'll do that if they have to, right? They'll make him a rotational guy if they have to. They took him with a second round pick. He's big enough. McVay knows what he needs. I would hold. I think everything is proceeding according to plan. This is exactly what I expected to happen, and I had him as the number 3 tight end in the class last year.
Oh, so let's go.
I'm like, yeah, he's less far along than a Mason Taylor or whatever, but like, this is what it takes. This is the process. Trey McBride took forever. Tucker Kraft took forever. Like, it's fine. It's fine. And the fact that he's commanding McVay to put him in the game somehow because of what he already brings. And I think that it's really just going to depend on what they do with the blocking. And I trust McVay. I do.
Me too. Music to my ears. All right, Ryan, do you have any tight end takes you need to elicit from Max here before we take our second break?
I have 2 just kind of random guys I want to ask you about, Max.
Let's hear it.
When we talk about unhealthy offenses, the Giants definitely come to mind. We've kind of been seeing Theo Johnson in this every down role, really since the end of his rookie season, but especially this year. He is very rarely running routes in line, or excuse me, he's very rarely running routes in line, which is something I've noticed. I don't know if you have thoughts on him, if there's any sort of upside for Theo Johnson long term. He's a guy that, yeah, I don't know. I think some people are starting him in fantasy, plugging him in DFS and such. So was curious how he fits into your schema here.
Yeah, they need to free Theo. What the hell? I mean, I was watching the Eagles game. I was watching the All-22, and the Giants have been on the no-fly list for me for a while. I watched him because I watched every tight end in the offseason. So I just gridded through all the Giants games in the offseason. I was like, yeah, Theo Johnson looks like a rookie, but I hadn't watched them this year yet until the Eagles game because they look pretty good. I was like, oh, Jackson, I was skeptical, but he was such an unknown. I want to see what this looks like. And Theo Johnson's out here toasting Cooper DeJean and stuff on deep overs and sails and deep corners. This guy's fluid. He's explosive. He's not going to be. He doesn't have the deceleration and quickness to be a guy in the slot, but he's 6'6", 265. Are we serious? Please just pop him on a deep over, run him on a deep over sail. And a lot of this stuff works off the run game, which the Giants can't really do because their offensive line sucks and Scadaboo's leg is twisted. So that's tough. But this is, it goes back to my earlier point about being these guys, about these guys being indicators and sensitive to what's around them. This is not an offense that is designed to get a guy like him the ball. But if you popped him on Seattle right now in Barner's place, I mean, I think you would lose a little bit of blocking just because Barner's so special as a blocker. But man, just the juice you would get out of this guy, popping behind the linebackers, popping on these deep overs, sliding into the flat, working the seams. I think he's really good. I think there's a lot of long-term upside. They got to get him in a new staff though.
Okay. Yeah, that was what I was afraid you were going to say. I don't know if we're going to get a new staff with the Giants, but yeah, that's really good to have in the back of our minds. And my only other quick thing for this season is Brenton Strange going to come back and fix the Jaguars offense? How big of a addition is this going to be if he comes back healthy in the next couple of weeks? They've obviously been very desperate to add pass catchers. I think he can kind of give you that to a decent extent. The run game was actually decent last week. Had been kind of up and down since he'd been out, though. Where do you see him fitting in here?
Well, I mean, we talked about Pokemon earlier, right? And this is where I can kind of bring that back. He's the middle tier Pokemon evolution of Tucker Craft. And so,
okay,
like if you look at Brenton Strange and Tucker Craft, they are the same player stylistically. So they are a little bit stiff. So they're not necessarily these guys who are out there running like a sail route against man coverage or doing all that stuff that even guys like TJ Hawkinson, Sam Laporta, they just don't have the hip flexibility. But what they are is these elite yak guys who are quick in the feet and explosive and fast and strong and hard to tackle. And so with that speed, that allows them to be big threats on play action because they can stretch that second level. It's hard for linebackers to roll back on them. So you can get them involved there. And in the pure drop back game, their role is limited, but they are big factors on quick games in quick game. So like if they're running a stick route or an over the ball or that sort of static zony stuff and then running after the catch, they're big threats there. And Tucker Craft is obviously fantastic there as well. And on checkdowns. So like when they're leaving 7 in the protection and they're having the running back and the tight end chip release or check release or whatever, and those guys get too much depth and you get it to Brenton Strange at 3 yards, that can turn into 20. And Tucker Craft routinely turns that into 20, which is a big part of making their offense so sustainable, right? Like the Packers are so dependent on 7-step in their drop back game. Like it's 12 to 30, it's 12 to 50 yards, right? With their pass game. And there's none of that 7 to 15 intermediate stuff because they don't have the guys with the precision to do it. So when teams sell out and take away their deep stuff, it's their down-to-down answer that makes them sustainable in the passing game is Tucker Craft turning 4-yard checkdowns into 8-yard gains very routinely. Brenton Strange does a lot of the same thing. And I think that obviously not at the same level because Tucker Craft is like he's a runaway, like bullet. He's like you guys ever see that documentary Tread?
No.
About the guy. So this guy in Colorado just lost his mind and rigged out this bulldozer to level the town. He didn't kill anybody. He just ran around leveling buildings in this vehicle. That's Tucker Craft.
Pretty much.
But Brenton Strange is like a smaller, less dangerous version who gets a big newspaper article, but probably doesn't get a documentary.
Yeah.
But they fill that same role, and I think it's going to help them a little bit down-to-down sustainability. Jacoby Myers is a huge ad. I wanted the Packers to add Jacoby Myers for that exact reason. But he's huge. I mean, they run the ball well, and they run the ball well without him because their other tight ends can block, but their other tight ends don't do that as well. And so the ability to introduce both of that is going to help them just on a down-to-down basis.
I'm loving it. Anytime you compare anybody to Tucker Craft, that's going to get people very excited. Max, the people are coming around. I think at the beginning of the show, they had a little bit of a tough time adjusting to what the hell was going on. They log on, they see the whiteboard and everything. But people are really enjoying the tight end deep dive.
I saw one guy said that he thinks I live in Dusseldorf. I live these are just fall colors. That actually seems pretty nice. That might be an idea.
That would be nice. All right, great stuff here. We got to hit our second break, but we'll be right back with some Week 10 advanced matchup data for you.
Only CBS Sports can bring you big time during the heart of Saturday afternoons. It's big time.
It's big time. It's big time. It's big time.
On CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
All right, so where else could we start but tight end? Here are my Week 10 tight end rankings. Of course, Brock Bowers at the top, but that's not that interesting. What we need to talk about is Colston Loveland. Everybody picked him up this week. He gets a matchup against the New York Giants. Start us off, Ryan, with our first advanced matchup note of the day and Caleb Williams, Roma Dunze, what we're looking at against this man-heavy coverage scheme of the New York Giants.
Yeah, so before we say anything about Bears-Giants, I have to say there is like a weather concern in this game. It's very early. We don't exactly know what it will look like, but right now it looks like potentially some snow, potentially some wind. I'm quite high on this game and interested in the game environment and a lot of the players, but I just check in on Sunday morning. Keep in mind, all of this could change. They may not be able to throw very well. But yeah, biggest thing here, Giants play a ton of man coverage, and we see that really benefit Caleb Williams in a couple of ways. So the first thing is, against man, Caleb is able to just throw to his first read a lot more often. And Caleb Williams, more than maybe any other quarterback in the NFL, is like very much a first read merchant, where he is like top of the league in all passing efficiency metrics when targeting his first read, complete bottom of the league when he is not. Max can maybe speak more to that being because he doesn't really get through his progressions. He's a little bit raw in that sense. But that means this matchup is really great for him, just because against the Giants, like you can kind of get away with being a first read merchant. You can just throw to Rome Odunze, who also has amazing splits against man coverage. All of that's a little negative for Colston Loveland, though. Like, if Loveland is generally not going to be that early in the read progression, although maybe that's changing with how he's been performing. But yeah, generally that's not like a spot I want to play tight ends in, where I just think it's going to be Caleb bombing it to Odunze over and over and over again because the Giants can't stop it.
I think generally speaking, it's a good thing that this feels better for Caleb, because there are some matchups where it feels very bad. And I don't think that this is one of them. It's probably like maybe the best possible matchup on the board for Caleb. And to me, like, the Loveland stuff is not so much, that he will suffer from not being the first read, which, by the way, he was tied for first read lead this past week. But just if we get 300 passing yards from Caleb, that's good. That's good for the offense. And I do think that, especially if they get a lead in this game, which they're expected to, that opens up more of the play action passing to Loveland, where he is sometimes the first read. So I've got a much higher than consensus here. I'm thinking that we could get another huge blow-up spot for him. For the audio listeners, I have him above Harold Fannin Jr., Dalton Kincaid, Dallas Goedert, and below Sam Laporta. Does that look about right to you guys?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you're probably right. I'm probably overthinking it. Just if the Bears are going to be productive on offense, that's probably mostly what matters for Loveland. So yeah, I think this is about right. The Dolphins and Kincaid are interesting. Like, on paper, the Dolphins are one of the best matchups for opposing tight ends, but a lot of it has come actually in line, which is very rarely where Kincaid is, as Max could also speak to. So I kind of agree there. Loveland over Kincaid, I don't actually mind it.
Love it. Fannin over Kincaid, is that fine with you too? I mean, the New York Jets, man, I am terrified to see what this defense might look like going forward.
Oh, going forward? Yeah.
Like, it was already bad.
Yeah, oh, God. Those linebackers, man. Yeah, I mean, Fannon's going to catch his obligatory 6 checkdowns, and I think that those things are, they're going to get turned into yards because these guys can't tackle and they don't know what's happening. So Jets are a great matchup for any box receiver.
And that's another game where I think we'll see how it goes. You never want to bet on the Browns, but it could be a game where they're able to just bully ball their way around and run on them easily without Quinnen Williams, and that then opens up some of the play action stuff where we see Fannin get, catching the ball, turning around, just having one guy to beat, and all of a sudden there's space, which hasn't always been the case for him this year. Ryan, you had some notes on Judkins in this spot, right?
I did, yeah, and it's partially to do with Quinnen Williams being gone. So the Jets are allowing the most yards per carry of any team in the NFL on A and B gap runs. Those are just generally runs up the middle. 5.3 yards per carry on the A and B gaps. They just got rid of Quinnen Williams. 62% of Judkins' attempts have gone to the A or B gap this year. That is 13th most of 44 qualifiers. Jets a top 5 run funnel by pass rate over expectation allowed. In the Browns' 2 wins, he averages, I believe it's close to 20 fantasy points per game. Yeah, just over 21 DraftKings fantasy points per game. Yeah, this is how I'm mostly expecting the Browns to conduct themselves this week, is just running it down the Jets' throats.
Yep,
yeah, I mean,
makes a lot of sense.
Another note on that, they also just handed play calling to Tommy Rees, who is like obsessed with duo. Obsessed. If you go watch his Alabama and Notre Dame offenses, get into those 4-man services I talked about earlier and just run right into those extra gaps over and over and over and over and over. So I think they're going to ride Judkins super hard.
I thought that was interesting that they made that change. I expect it's probably just to emphasize Judkins. That makes sense. Maybe, Max, you could draw up on the whiteboard. I think a lot of people probably know gaps at least, but you could give us just a very clear and easy illustration of gaps, because I think Ryan had a few notes about gaps today. All right. We're going to keep it tight ends here before we transition to a few other positions. Here's where, we've talked about Juwan Johnson, Theo Johnson. I think Juwan Johnson stands to benefit from the Rashid Shaheed trade potentially. Guys,
I did have a note on that note quickly, actually. Yeah, which is basically just that. So the Panthers play the most cover 3, and we saw Shuck throw to Shaheed 40% of the time against cover 3 last week. Obviously, small sample, but Juwan historically has been a pretty good receiver against cover 3, about 10% more efficient. So yeah, I do actually kind of lean toward him being the one to benefit here. Shuck and Juwan have the college connection back in the day, because Shuck is so old. So yeah, I like Juwan way more than I should for a team that has like a 15-point total or whatever it is this week.
That's so amazing. I've heard that, but totally forgot that those two played college football together. Insane. Because Juwan's in like year 4 or 5 or something at this point. That's hilarious. Okay, yeah, so I've got Juwan up at tight end 12. This range, I think after the Dallas Goedert, Dalton Kincaid, Hunter Henry guys, like it's really tough to figure out where everyone belongs, because I've got some guys here that I actually think have a decent outlook, like Mason Taylor, Luke Musgrave, AJ Barner, but they're much lower. So like Mason Taylor is going against a man coverage heavy team. I think maybe that's not a great fit for him. Does anything look off to you?
Let's see. I think Dalton Schultz is probably way too low.
Okay.
He's been just over 60 receiving yards per game in his last 4 games. That's like somewhat inflated by Nico Collins missing time, but the Jaguars have allowed the second most schedule adjusted fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Like the volume has been good for Schultz. I would want to get him probably up into like the Theo Johnson range. I would play Schultz over Theo this week.
Okay. Yeah, I keep ranking him low just because I think he's really hurt right now, really banged up and playing through stuff. And also, I just want to know part of that offense. But you're right, the usage has been pretty good. All right, anything else to tight end? Should we move on to running back? Talk about some more gaps?
Let's do it.
Running back is really weird this week. I've got Judkins at running back 13, but I think the upside is much, much higher. So there's basically a tier break between the top guys and then Judkins, and he kind of separates the rest of the crowd here. I want to hear, do you have any thoughts on Travis Etienne and the Jaguars offense, either one of you, on the road against Houston? Like, is there any hope here?
Yes. I have a lot of thoughts about
let's go.
Houston's run defense. I think it is atrocious, and it bothers me so much that they still play this way. But so this will actually get us into the gaps. But like, they are a pure 4-down team, and their defensive line, especially their edge defenders, are small and they are fast. So they have Danielle Hunter's 260, but he's a lean 260 and he's a pure rusher. So like, if you look at how they like to space their fronts, it's not great. And so, hold on, I gotta just finish drawing.
We're going back to the board, baby.
Yeah. While Max draws, I just want to say I had literally no thoughts on Travis Etienne this week. I was kind of like, you know what, Houston defense, road underdogs, like just zero interest. But I am very interested to hear what Max has to say.
He looked really good coming out of the bye. They loaded him up, 27 touches, and I think like all the Britton Strange stuff that we talked about, it's like they need something in that area of the field. And so I think it makes sense that he could be a good play if we feel okay about the matchup.
Yeah, well, I mean, if first things first, the Jaguars are pretty high in EPA per rush. I forgot where they exactly are, but I was looking at it yesterday. Their run game is really good, and that's with a passing game that's struggling, which underscores that even more. It's obviously Liam Cohen as well. He's got a lot of skins on the wall as far as orchestrating great run games. And they have, strange or no, They're going to have 2 tight ends that can block, or they're going to have 3, because they have Hunter Long, they have Johnny Munt, and then of course they have Brenton Strange. All those guys are ass kickers. Of course, 2 of them are Rams as well, but they pass those guys around. Those guys are maulers. And so the problem with the Texans, and we're going to take a look here, is you see the gaps here, right? They're just labeled in the black boxes. And the lines next to the running back are how direct the path is to get to these gaps. And so if you're in the A gap there, you've got to make sure that you have somebody, like, you can't get into a position where a safety or a nickel is going to end up having to fit that gap. And teams end up in those positions, and it's not great, because the closer to the center you are, the more direct the path is, and the less that gap's defender can play in space if it's an off-ball defender, right? So if you look here, I drew another 4-man surface with the Y and the F and the 2 tight ends, just to show you the CD and the E gap as well, but also to show you the front spacing for the Texans. Now, if you look at them, the ends are on the end, and they keep those guys on the end a lot, especially since they're pretty small. And getting between the Y and the offensive tackle, or getting between the Y and the F, means that you're in between defenders, and you can't just rush up field and set the edge and set the perimeter, which is what these teams who use wide 9 type small edges like to do. It's like, that's all you got to do in the run game, right? Get up field, set the edge. Well, the problem is, look at all of that space. I got to get the red out of here. Look at all of this space in here. We're going to, to go back to that conversation of the bubbles, right? Look at all of this. Look at all of this. It's not good, right? And if you're going to play nickel, that's extra not good. Now, in this situation, especially against a team like that, they would not be playing nickel. They would be playing base. But that means, you either got to move Jalen Petrie to safety or take him off the field. This isn't optimal. But either way, that's a lot of space. And so what they need to be able to do is reduce their ends. But since they sell out to speed on the front, they can't do this and put this guy here, right? Like, if you have Cameron Jordan, you can put that guy there because he can take on that double team and he can hold that space. But if you put a 245-pound, even Will Anderson is he's a tough dude. He's a mauler at Alabama. And, he's a great pass rusher and all that stuff. But you put him between a tackle and Hunter Long or Johnny Munt, and they're just gonna quad combo that guy, and they're just gonna or tray combo him with the tackle and tight end, and they're just gonna run right into that space, And if you are gonna reduce him inside, then you got to reduce, a lot of times what 4-down teams will do there is they'll reduce the Sam down on the ball. But that's going to require a true Sam linebacker, because you're going to you need guys on the line of scrimmage to plug up these gaps. Because if you have too many bubbles and too much space, and it looks better on the screen when you can really see it, I'll send you guys screenshots after this. But like there are chasms, and if you look at the Lions game last year when the Texans played them, and you look at the Ravens game especially last year, it's just against these heavy surfaces, they cannot deal with them without making serious compromises. Now, can the Jaguars punish them for loading the box? I mean, in theory, they would be able to crush it because Brian Thomas Jr. should be such a consistent deep threat, and Travis Hunter, has been intermittently a deep threat, and their passing game is so mercurial that you can't really trust it. Maybe they load the box and get away with it, but at the same time, like, they are a team that runs the ball to 12 personnel. They run a lot of gap scheme. They create these heavy surfaces. This is a team I would be scared of if I were DeMeco Ryans.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, especially like emphasizing that their edge guys are there for the purpose of like rushing, right? And so in this type of a situation, like they're just going to be overwhelmed by the tight end and the double team there. So I'm moving ETN up. What do you think? How do you feel about that, Ryan? You got some next level.
Yeah, no, I can't really argue with that. Yeah.
Got some next level mastering matchups today in the run game. Freaking love it, Max. Thank you. Anything on the Seattle running backs? Any thoughts on that? We talked about them a lot earlier. And this specific matchup, Kenneth Walker got more involved last week. Arizona, I know, like does a lot to. I feel like they kind of invite you to beat them with the shorter stuff. Do you have any thoughts on the running backs in this spot, Max?
I mean, they're another team that's very modern defensively, and I think that they're going to be an interesting guinea pig to see what happens and see if teams adjust. But that's the kind of thing that I'm really making actionable moves on when I've seen it. And I think that until we see a team do it and we see the paradigm shift, I'm probably just going to operate as is.
Yeah, I know that Gennett can be adaptive. I feel like week to week. When I've dug into him, he like does it. He's kind of all over the place week to week with what he does. And so I was like, maybe this is kind of the defense that does adjust to, just try, like, we will stop Jason. Like, nobody's been able to, but maybe we will. I mean, Jason is on a streak right now where it's like there's only a few players in NFL history who have had 120 yards every single game. And most of the time, the reason that stops is because somebody decides they're going to stop it, So I feel like this might be that week. We'll see. I don't know if Arizona has the talent to do it, but I'm a little bit in on starting Seattle's running backs if you have to. I know it's been rough out there. So here's where I'm at on these guys, and I would move Etienne up. What do you think, Ryan? Move Etienne up basically into the top of this range behind Judkins, like Jalen Warren, Rashad White, Ashton Genty, Etienne in that same range. Does that feel good to you? 27 touches, man.
Yeah, no, I know that. Yeah, and they like really committed to the run last week. Would not be surprised to see similar. Yeah, I think so. Honestly, as weird as it feels, I've waved the white flag on Bashal Tune for this season. By the way, I assume the Beyond the Box Score people would want the update on that. I don't know where you are at, Jacob, but
same place.
Last week was enough for me. Yeah.
Yeah. The people at Johnny Airport, shout out Johnny always in the comments. They are comparing Max to Charlie from It's Always Sunny. You've seen Sunny, right, Max?
Oh, of course.
So that's fun. That's endearing. That's a good comparison. All right, let's finish up with wide receiver and quarterback. Stick with our past game matchups here. So of course Jason at number 1, but maybe this is the week that teams slow him down. So you can see here. Roma Dunze, consensus is still higher than I expected, honestly. Maybe it's just the online Twitter streets that are so negative about Odunze right now. But coming off the goose egg, I've got him at wide receiver 12 behind Nico Collins, Cortland Sutton, Zay Flowers. So still like firmly in starting range in this matchup against the Giants for the reasons that Ryan laid out earlier. I do have Devontae Smith ahead of A.J. Brown. To me, this range is where things start to get really interesting. If you guys have anything from the guys up top that you want to talk about, go for it. But I think that they're in most lineups. It's Chris Olave, wide receiver 17, Michael Pittman, wide receiver 18, Tedero McMillan at wide receiver 19, and Marvin Harrison Jr. at wide receiver 20. I want to talk about Marv first, if anybody has any thoughts, just because we've talked about this game so much, Seattle versus Arizona.
Yeah, so Seahawks play a ton of zone. They're top 3 in the NFL in rate of zone coverage. That is very anti-Marvin Harrison, pro-Trey McBride. It's almost like exactly like just a 30% target per route run increase to McBride against zone, 30% decrease for Marvin Harrison. I guess the other guy that sticks out to me here, though, and maybe I would move both him and Harrison down a touch, is Deebo Samuel. This might kind of go to like the DFS discussion a little bit too, but Deebo's going to be a very popular DFS play. I think he's going to be like a guy people feel good about starting as like a wide receiver 2 this week. I kind of don't see it. And I kind of don't see it with this entire Commanders passing game. So basically the Lions play man coverage at a top 3 rate. And the Commanders have just had no answer for man coverage this year, especially when Terry McLaurin's been out. Like Marcus Mariota near the bottom of the league in adjusted net yards per attempt against man. And Deebo, just a 13% target share against man this year in Mariota's games. Also, the Lions tend to take away everything that's kind of underneath within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage. And Deebo has like a 5.9 average depth of target this year. So I feel like usually you're the low guy on Deebo, Jacob, but I would move both Marv and him probably like below a Wan'Dale Robinson, below an Alec Pierce. I just have like very bad matchup kind of angles on both of them.
Classic Ryan. I've got Alec Pierce 9 spots ahead of consensus, and he comes in and tells me I'm way too low on Alec Pierce. Did you have any, we'll get to Pierce and Pittman for sure with the Colts. Did you have any thoughts on McMillan or Olave? They kind of mirror each other. They stay in the same range in my rankings every week. Any matchup specific thoughts here?
Not really, other than like it's not even really a matchup. It's just like the Panthers are actually favorites. And to me, it's like the Panthers have the lowest pass rate over expectation in the entire NFL this year. Rico Dowdle is averaging over 30 fantasy points per game in his starts. It's like over 24 just in the Panthers wins, even if you don't control for if it's Dowdle starts. So like, yeah, to me, it's just like Dowdle's a top 5 running back, and that's all that they're going to have any desire to do this week against the Saints. So I don't know that I would move McMillan below like a DK Metcalf or any of these guys, but it's not like the week I'm going to him in DFS or like getting very excited. Honestly, that's like a season-long note on McMillan too. I'm like almost ready to say I don't think that we're going to see him as more than a low-end wide receiver too rest of season, and he's someone I'm kind of trying to package in deals to like upgrade to like an RB1 or whatever I need on my roster, because I do think he has trade value, but I don't think I'm past the point of thinking like the second half explosion is coming, because he's really freaking good. This offense is just not facilitating what we need it to.
Yeah, man, it would not surprise me at all if we see like 18 dropbacks from Bryce Young in this game. If they're just like, we're literally going to run it every single play, and I don't think that you can stop us. That's where I'm at with him, is like, I think he belongs in this range because it's a matchup that he could exploit and he could get there for fantasy on just a few plays. But at the same time, he just keeps moving down my rankings, and I honestly like think I might just prefer Alec Pierce. So it's been a weird adjustment for me with McMillan, because like I'm so convinced of the talent, but he just keeps dropping. Like me and Dan, for season long, like you said, and for this week, me and Dan were talking on Tuesday's episode about some like guys that you could buy super low, like Xavier Worthy or whatever, where they're just not front of mind. It's been like Alec Pierce in the previous weeks we've talked about. And the last couple of weeks I brought up Romeo Doubs, and I'm like, if you look at Doubs and compare him to McMillan, they look almost identical. Like their per route data is basically identical across the board. They both play in offenses that want to run, and Green Bay's offense is much better, Like, I know that McMillan is a better player, but, like, why not just Doubs over McMillan rest of season, basically, And, like, that's not how people have it ranked at all. So I'm kind of with you on McMillan, as sad as that is. I think he's probably going to move down. So here, for Week 10, here's where I've got Romeo Doubs, by the way. Tough matchup against the Eagles. If you have anything on him, go ahead and add it. But I do have Alec Pierce ahead of him, Michael Pittman up in this range, above McMillan. I wanted to start with the Colts receivers. Did you have anything on Doubs?
Nothing on Doubs other than everything you just said. The usage is great. It should continue to be great. Yeah. I'm going to challenge you even further on the Colts receivers. Okay. Why don't you just treat them like the Eagles receivers and have them back to back? Because I think specifically in this matchup, while we saw it last week, exactly, Steelers, ton of single high. Alec Pierce completely destroys single high. Same number of receiving yards as Michael Pittman. Led the team in targets, I believe, right? Mm-hmm. Like it was basically the exact usage and matchup we expected. The Falcons are an even more extreme, like single high plus blitzing type of team. Why not just have Alec Pierce right next to Michael Pittman? Like we have a 1 week proof of concept where that's like exactly what happened minus the touchdown.
22-yard average depth of target is why not. That's just extremely that's volatile. And so like at any point he could have a game that should be a good game, but Daniel Jones and this average depth of target, the equation results in 180 air yards, 2 catches for 36 yards. That's just an extremely real outcome that could happen at any time. But the upside is huge, for sure, to your point and points we've been making on Beyond the Box Score all year long, really. The notes, but for this week, though, look good specifically for Pierce. The Falcons blitz more than any team. Pierce has a 25% target per route run rate and 2.85 yards per route run against the blitz per the fantasy points data suite. He leads the Colts offense in everything against the blitz, ahead of Michael Pittman, ahead of Tyler Warren. So I definitely like the opportunity here to go against more single high safety coverage and this aggressive defense that we've talked about with the Falcons. Nobody really plays like the Falcons, and so they're leaving themselves prone to big plays down the field. And you don't want to do that against Big Daddy Alec Pierce. You do not. So he could just keep rolling. Maybe this is the week we finally see him get a touchdown. If you want to start him ahead of anyone on the screen here, if you want to start him ahead of the Eagles receivers even, like, I'm totally fine with it. He could be the top scorer in fantasy at wide receiver this week, and like that wouldn't surprise me at all.
Fully agreed. Over 4 yards per out run against cover 3. Like you can name all the numbers, and they're all amazing for Alec Pierce in this matchup. Yeah.
Anybody have anything on Jameson Williams against Washington's defense? It feels like a good spot for him, but I didn't get a chance to like find a way to illustrate that to people.
Sure. So I mean, the Commanders, I believe, are top 3 in receiving yards per game allowed on the deep ball this year. The JSN definitely helped push that number up a little bit last week. But I still can't do it with Jameson Williams personally. I mean, they're allowing the fewest schedule-adjusted fantasy points per game to outside wide receivers this year, and they are top 4 in schedule-adjusted fantasy points per game allowed to the slot. So it's another Amon-Ra St. Brown game. Every game is an Amon-Ra St. Brown game. They, like Dan Campbell can say, they're going to get Jameson Williams involved more and more every single week, and we just see it. The first read target share never come up above like 16%, and I think that's just the player he is. So I would have him definitely below Alec Pierce. Like everything you complain about with Alec Pierce in terms of, he can just completely bust on 150 air yards. Same exact thing with JMO. And I like the matchup way less. The player has been less productive. The usage is worse. So yeah, give me Pierce over JMO for sure.
Do you have any thoughts on the matchup, Max?
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason for them to go away from St. Brown and Laporta. You know, if the matchup is going to be good for them to go to their best guys. So, you know, I don't think that Washington's going to come out and do anything really bespoke or crazy to take those guys away. And I think it's just going to kind of be a business as usual game. I also don't think that the Lions are going to come out and really draw up a get ahead of whatever the other team's going to do kind of game plan this week. This isn't a big game. This isn't a playoff game. This isn't anything like it. It just feels like it's going to be a run your stuff game for the Lions, and their stuff is Laporta and St. Brown.
Makes a lot of sense. I have a few more blitz and pressure notes I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on. So the Jaguars are blitzing way more, 41% over the past month. They're playing more man coverage, just more aggressive in general lately. I think you maybe had something on this, Ryan. Only Miami, the Dolphins, have allowed more fantasy points per dropback when using man coverage. So, like, maybe this is an Nico Collins spot. I know we've expressed a lot of apprehension about this offense. Did you have anything on this to add, Ryan?
I do, yeah. I think this is a Nico Collins spot. So, yeah, not only are they playing more man, more single high, more blitzing since they acquired Greg Newsome, it hasn't worked very well. And also, they still aren't really getting pressure on the quarterback, which is like the biggest thing in terms of, can this Texans offense function? Are they getting pressured? If they're not, it might be decent. Even with Davis Mills, Nico Collins had over 20 expected fantasy points in 3 quarters just from Davis Mills last week. He was like 6 inches from a touchdown. Yeah, I just really like this. I think while the game total's very low, the game environment is pretty decent. Jaguars' biggest pass funnel, which I know the chat will love in the NFL, by pass rate over expectation allowed. Each of these teams actually play pretty fast. They both rank top 6 in pace, just total plays per game. So yeah, I think this is a really good blow-up spot for Nico Collins, and I think he's an awesome DFS play that nobody's going to look at.
Love it. Okay, and then I had 2 more. These are offenses that are facing defenses that get pressure very quickly, and they do it in different ways. The first defense is the Bills. They don't blitz as much as the second defense, which is the Vikings. The Bills, we saw it against the Chiefs. Like, Joey Bosa played his butt off. They're getting quick pressure this year for sure, all year long. They face Miami. So, of course, the emphasis is to get the ball out quickly. How do we feel? We've already seen these teams face off once. How do we feel about Jalen Waddle in this spot, Tua in this spot? Any thoughts on this matchup?
To me, it's really just like both of these teams are probably going to run the ball a lot. The Bills are definitely going to run the ball a lot. That has clearly been like their new identity. And with Devon Achane, it's also like a perfect matchup. I was talking about the gap stuff earlier. And so Achane, let's see, 64% of his rush attempts have gone outside C or D gaps this year. That's the second most. Bills are top 5 in yards per carry allowed, top 6 in yards after contact per attempt allowed on those runs. Bills also allowing the lowest pass rate over expectation in the league. So I think the Dolphins could actually find success on the ground. We've got an efficient Devon Achane back this year. Yeah, I don't really have anything just on the Waddle matchup aside from like his usage has been elite since Tyreek Hill went down. If you just take out the inclement weather game against the Browns, I think Waddle's like a good play, but
a risky one.
Yeah, a risky one. I think Achane is like clearly where I'd be going in DFS rather than him.
Nico Collins, Rome Odunze, or Waddle?
Give me Rome unless we find out the weather's like really, really bad, and then it's Nico.
Wild stuff. All right, that's interesting. I'm fine with that. The other one was, I would love to hear any thoughts on this Baltimore-Minnesota matchup. I'm very curious about what Minnesota did last week that worked, but I'll start specifically with the the Baltimore offense against Minnesota and Brian Flores. Because I got Zay Flowers really high too. I've got him above those guys we just talked about.
Yeah, well, I mean,
oh,
sorry, Ryan.
Go ahead, Max. You first, Max. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that like the Vikings defense is especially since they got rid of Harrison Phillips, is very much a house of cards a little bit in the run game, and I think that they're trying to glamour and smoke and mirrors their way around their own unsoundness. But when you play a team like the Ravens that can run the ball as well as they do, at least in theory, that sort of all just goes away because they're just going to keep doing it. And I think it's going to depend on how well they can run the ball. I think that even, with Lamar back now, which is great, even when they had him at the beginning of the year, they haven't been able to run the ball at the level that they have been the last few years. And I think that this is going to be a big game for them to get started. And if they can do that, I think that's going to open up a lot for Zay Flowers, just because he feasts so much off their run game with those deep crossers and those deep digs against cover 3 and all those basic looks that they get that keeps Lamar in rhythm so effectively and so easily. But like, it's just so interesting as far as which way this game is going to go, because if they just need their run game to gel and it's just not there yet, and they end up in a lot of obvious pass situations, I think it actually could be weird and tough for them. But I think that if they don't and they're able to run the ball really well, either they're just the tough thing is that either you can galaxy brain it and say this is going to open up a ton for Zay Flowers in the pass game like it always has, or they're just going to keep running the ball and Lamar is going to throw 21 times and there just aren't enough targets to go around. So the conclusions therein are like diametrically opposed as far as the outlook this week for Zay Flowers, even if they are rooted in the same evaluation. So, I have no clue, because anything I say could be opposite and exactly wrong.
That's exactly what we're doing here. That's the outcome that we always come to. True wisdom is knowing that you know nothing. Shout out the chat. We've got run funnel references in the chat.
Let's
Ryan.
go.
Big day. The chat has come around. Okay, so yeah, you see on the screen, this is where I've kind of adjusted things. I've got Zay Flowers above Nico, and then Odunze, and then Waddle. They're above Ladd McConkey and the Philadelphia receivers, Stephon Diggs, and then you get into the lower end wide receiver 2 range that we've talked about. Chris Olave, I did have him stick up here above the Indianapolis receivers. I've got Wan'Dale Robinson in between Pittman and Alec Pierce. So I've got Pierce all the way up to wide receiver 20. Does that appease you, Ryan? 13 spots ahead of consensus.
I will accept Alec Pierce 13 spots ahead. That is, and
it could be much bigger. It could be much bigger if you want to get crazy with it. Go for it. So yeah, I think this is we did a pretty good job here. Juwan Jennings, any thoughts on Juwan Jennings? We had some questions about him in the chat.
Juwan Jennings. So like this is I'm really angry that we're not getting Ricky Pearsall back, because this would be like the perfect Ricky Pearsall spot. Like he's shredded cover 3. Like he's been the one that like over the top has been so great. So yeah, I just have like nothing on this 49ers offense aside from it's probably going to be similar to last time they played, which is like they can kind of do the underneath scam thing. It seems like the Rams are totally cool with them doing that. But I'm not all that high on like Jennings or anyone else from the 49ers without Pearsall.
All right. Any thoughts on McVay versus Shanahan, Max?
I mean, it's going to be as fun as it always is, right? With Shanahan finding some ridiculous, against all reason way to win the game and dunk on his friend. Because I thought last time they were gonna get crushed, and Stafford played ridiculous football when really needed him to in that second half. But
that game was so fun.
They can't get away with it again, right? I mean, they can't just go full Kendrick Bourne, Randy Moss mode.
This is the team that Juwan Jennings had that crazy game against last year, where he had like 40 points.
Yeah, and the coverage unit's weak. It is. But as they've gotten more out of their safety unit, it's gotten a little bit better. But is Shanahan, and this is what I should have realized the first time, is that when you do have these kind of structural weaknesses and you try to game your way around it a little bit, you run into a play caller like Shanahan who's just gonna, strip out all of the decorations in the window dressing and is going to expose what's there. So if Jennings is their best guy, if Kittle's not back in game shape yet, like he talked about that when he first came back, he's like, I'm not just not in game shape yet. So if he's not back in game shape, there's a good chance that Jennings is their best guy. And that, especially with, you imagine they're going to have an eye on Kendrick Bourne after he went full Jamar Chase on them. So it could be a good spot. Could be.
How do you feel about Kevin O'Connell against Baltimore here, JJ McCarthy? Did you have any McCarthy thoughts? This back range of quarterbacks is really tough to figure out. And while you just think about how you want to give that to us here, I want to hear your Justin Fields note, Ryan, because it's pretty crazy. And of course, nobody knows how the hell to rank Justin Fields when you are ever safe to start Justin Fields. I've got him at QB 17, but man, he could be much, much higher than that. But it's do you want to start him against the Browns? Ryan, maybe you do.
Yeah, you can never rank Justin Fields QB 17. You need to rank him QB 5 or QB 30 every single.
Right.
Just pick one. Hope you're right. You'll win the Fantasy Pros accuracy contest that way. I would lean toward the higher end of that this week, assuming he starts, which I think he will. But yeah, the Browns top 5 in the NFL in man coverage. So against man coverage, Justin Fields averages 0.91 fantasy points per dropback. That would easily be the QB1. That's more than Lamar Jackson averages. That's more than Josh Allen. That's insane. Against zone, 0.27 fantasy points per dropback. That would be the QB 36. I do think that, and also because Garrett Wilson practiced Wednesday, I think he's practicing again today. Could be another spot where Fields can just kind of get away with throwing to Wilson and nothing else needing to happen. They're not needing to be a counterpunch. Wilson up at nearly a 40% target share against man. The Browns have also kind of been getting roasted on the perimeter the last few weeks since they traded for Tyson Campbell. Part of that was DK Metcalf going off against Campbell for 19.5 fantasy points a couple weeks ago. Then we saw Kayshon Boutte and Mac Hollins combined for over 32 fantasy points just on the outside against the Browns in week 8. Part of that, some of that was against backups, but at least 50% of that was against Campbell and Denzel Ward. So I do think the Browns secondary is maybe a little more suspect now, just as they're kind of figuring stuff out, getting Campbell in there. So that's an interesting angle for me to go to. Just as gross as it feels, Justin Fields plus Garrett Wilson stacks, I think have some steam, some interest in tournaments this week. And yeah, I would rank Fields. I would definitely rank him over JJ McCarthy to bridge it back to that. To me, the Ravens defense, they had a completely clean injury report this week, which is a welcome change. They've only allowed about 12 fantasy points per game to Tua and to who I forget the second quarterback they played over the last 2 weeks, but to two JJ McCarthy-esque level fantasy quarterbacks, 12 fantasy points per game. The defense looks better. So I am not that into the Vikings generally this week. Do think it's a big Derrick Henry game.
All right. Ryan says the Browns have some steam. I'm excited to get some Browns Jets in his life in DFS this week. So if that sounds like fun to you, you got Ryan's stamp of approval. Did you have any JJ McCarthy thoughts for us, Max?
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously such a lightning rod, especially with how Darnold is playing. But there's just no way to me that we're really going to see anything put on JJ McCarthy's back, certainly from a fantasy perspective, for a while. The fact that they struggle to run the ball is killing them. I don't know. I feel like we should all just take a breath on JJ McCarthy for like 6 weeks. In general,
I think the Vikings would love to. So maybe we're feeling better about him, like down in this range behind Mariota, Rodgers, Mac Jones, Jacoby Brissett.
Yeah, they're going to try to run Mariota. That's the thing. They always do, like really hard. And from a fantasy perspective, like get him in the end zone twice, maybe once in garbage time, and he gets 15 carries. And it's a different reality than such a low event JJ McCarthy game.
All right. Well, I'm going to, unless you have any disputes or think anybody needs to move here, we're going to wrap up with this mid-range QB2 because I do think people are having a tough time figuring out where to go, whether it's streaming or whatever, with quarterback buys and injuries, and then we're going to get out of here. Did you guys have anything else to add? All good?
All
right.
Yeah, these rankings look perfect to me. You're gonna be number one in the contest this week.
Thank you as always for your help, Ryan, and your support. We've got, starting at QB 13, Sam Darnold against Arizona. We've talked about that game. Very intrigued to see how that goes. The upside is high, but also it could be a game where maybe we see a little bit more running. So if you want to go with one of these other options, it's pretty interchangeable for me in this range. So Darnold at 13, Jordan Love at 14 against the Eagles, Justin Fields at 15. It's going to be 1 or 30. How lucky do you feel? Marcus Mariota at 16, followed by Aaron Rodgers, Mac Jones, Jacoby Brissett. I love this simulation. Finally, I've been waiting so long to get the stupid Kyler stuff over with. Jacoby Brissett on the road against the Seahawks. What could go wrong? JJ McCarthy, Tua Tagovailoa. I think at this point, you probably don't want to be starting any of these guys, but I'll admit I am in some of my Superflex Dynasty leagues. This has been extremely fun. Thank you guys so much for being here. Ryan, tell the people where they can find even more matchup notes.
Yeah, you can find all of my matchup notes over on my advanced matchups article on fantasypoints.com. That comes out every Friday morning, and you can use promo code matchups15 to get yourself 15% off any package over at Fantasy Points, whether it's the Fantasy Points data suite or the premium or all-in package to get my advanced matchups notes. Yeah, that's it. Thanks so much, Jacob, and thanks so much, Max.
Y'all got to go check that out. Ryan is absolutely balling these days. Look at the cozy vibes there. I'm so happy for this guy and the glow up. It has been so great to watch. The chat is asking, where do we find Max? That is a great question. Please help the people, Max. Where do they get some more of the goods here?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, my Twitter at MaxToscano1 is kind of the central point where everything I do runs through. It all ends up there and it all gets promoted there. So that's kind of the best place to find all of it. I obviously, as I said earlier, I host the Substack, Remember the Tight Ends, which is all tight end focused. Should have something on Colston Loveland's big week last week coming out probably tomorrow morning. Yes. And I also do some X's and O's stuff for Bengals Talk over at Sports Illustrated. And I do some Jets related stuff with Badlands as well. So that's certainly been interesting because it's wild over there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's all the stuff I'm up to right now.
All right. Thank you so much for making the time. Again, this has been a fun funnel we've got in the chat. This has been a fun funnel. Oh my gosh. I wish we could do this for just 3 hours, but we've got to get out of here. We will be back surely with more Max in the future to talk through tight ends, all the fun X's and O's. Thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you to everybody in the chat for all the questions. This is a fun interactive show and always appreciate y'all showing up and supporting. Please do remember to like the video. If you have a question for us, leave that in the Apple or Spotify reviews, and we'll get to that on the Tuesday and Wednesday show. Dan and I will. If you have a question for Ryan, leave that. Maybe we can get to it on the Thursday show next week. But just thank you all so much for being here. Have a good weekend. Enjoy your week 10. For Ryan, for Max, for myself, for producer Josh, this has been Beyond the Box Score.